I have recently published a video about time-lapses and hyperlapses with drones, and a lot of people ask me if it is possible to perform them with a Mini 2 or with a Mavic Mini. In this video I will show you how to get the best possible result in time-lapses with these drones. I will also show how it is possible using some creativity to perform some sort of hyperlapse, even though these two drones don't have a specific hyperlapse mode. This method will also work for any other drone that doesn't have a specific hyperlapse mode, like the Spark or other previous models of the Mavic or Phantom line. There are plenty of things to see and some interesting images of volcanic activity, so let's get going immediately. But first, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Normally I always use RAW, as they contain more information, can withstand heavier post-processing when needed, and give a better final quality. The original Mavic Mini could only produce JPEG file, while the Mini 2 has now the ability to save RAW files, which is possibly the most important upgrade of this model. When we choose to save the files as JPEG, the Mini 2 is able to shoot photos starting from a frequency of one photo every 2 seconds. If we want to shoot in RAW format, the minimum frequency allowed is one shot every 5 seconds. This is a big limitation, as for time-lapses and even more for hyperlapses, one shot every 5 seconds is often too much. And as we will see later, in many cases we will have no choice but using JPEG files. But the good news is that the quality of the JPEG files with the two drones is excellent, much better than I expected. I really don't see a technical reason why it should not be possible to shoot in RAW format at a slower interval, at least one shot every 3 seconds. So I hope the DJI will give us the chance in a firmware release. Oh, and while I'm in the suggestion chapter, at the moment the only choice for saving the photo are JPEG or JPEG plus RAW. But when I shoot RAW, I really don't want to have a JPEG copy. It would be much nicer if we could choose to save only RAW files. Besides, that would make the buffering faster and allow for a shorter frequency of shots. Finally, when we are shooting in JPEG, we have a choice of one shot every 2, 3, 5 seconds and so on. It would be nice to have the choice of choosing one shot every 4 seconds, and again, I don't see any technical reason why it shouldn't be possible. Unfortunately, I have not received the ND filter for my Mini 2 yet, so I'm very limited in what sort of time-lapses or hyperlapses I can shoot. ND filters are extremely important to get the correct amount of motion blur, especially with drones that don't have a manual control of aperture, like the two models analyzed here. In this video I will try to avoid shooting scenes containing moving elements like people, cars or boats, as they would look very jittery at the wrong shutter speed. So I will concentrate mostly on cloud movements where the correct shutter speed is not so important, although even cloud time-lapses look better with ND filters. I have been quite lucky, as Mount Etna has been moody in the past few days, so I've been able to shoot some scene of volcano activity. Otherwise, I will try to shoot after sunset, when it is possible to use a relatively slow shutter speed, even without filters. Unlike other models of the Mavic line, the Mavic Mini and the Mini 2 cannot put together a time-lapse automatically after shooting the photos. So the user has to go through the process of putting the images into a video timeline, color grading and stabilizing. I do not see it as an issue, as I do post-process all my time-lapse and hyperlapses, either from the RAW or from the JPEG files, as it is the only way to have control of the final result, and eventually to add a series of special effects. In the case of drones, a good care is needed in stabilizing, as the drifting of the aircraft while shooting photos is a major concern. I cannot go into detail about how I post-process my time-lapses in this video, but please let me know in the comment below if you're interested in a specific video about it. There is always some confusion about the two terms, so let me quickly explain the difference. We call time-lapse a series of photos made with a static point of view, and then edited on a video timeline. The only difference in hyperlapses is that the point of view, which is the camera, will be moving. With drones, most people tend to shoot hyperlapses, as the aircraft is an excellent way to keep the camera in a constant, smooth motion. But the time-lapse with the drone hovering in a static way is an excellent alternative, especially when the scene contains already a good deal of motion or interesting action, as the movement of the point of view could otherwise distract the viewer. I have analyzed in depth the difference between the two techniques in my previous video, so please refer to it if you want to go deeper. In the Mini 2 and the Mavic Mini we have a photo mode called timed shot, which is basically an intervalometer. We can choose a frequency of shots, and when we hit the shutter icon, it will start shooting photos at a given interval. A few days ago I was shooting some time-lapses of volcanic activity on Mount Etna with a Mavic 2 Pro. For some reasons it was drifting a lot, and the results I was getting were not particularly good. So I decided to have a go with my Mini 2. I was surprised to notice how stable this drone is while hovering. I was using RAW files and I find the result very good, better than my expectations. The files respond well to color grading and the image is very stable. There is just a tiny bit of warping towards the left edge, but it can very easily be solved in post-processing. The length of the video is only 9 seconds. Less than what I would like. But that is always the case using RAW files with this drone. Since the minimum frequency is one shot every 5 seconds, I managed to take only 250 photos instead of 300, as I normally do for a result of 12.5 seconds. Since Mount Etna was in the mood, I decided to have another go, this time comparing RAW files to JPEG. So I went first for the RAW, again at one shot every 5 seconds. I managed to get a time-lapse of 11 seconds by squeezing every minute of battery life, but I don't suggest doing it, as there is the risk of losing the drone. The result is good. The files respond well to color grading and the image is again quite stable, but maybe one shot every 5 seconds gives a movement in the cloud a bit too fast. Since I was not using any filter, the movement of the clouds is not buttery smooth, but otherwise I'm happy with it. Then I went to JPEG files at one shot every 3 seconds. I could get 18 seconds of time-lapse, and at this frequency the movement of the clouds is a bit smoother. The colors are surprisingly good for JPEG files, even though the one obtained with RAW files had a slightly richer tonality. There is a good amount of noise, but it can easily be taken away using neat video. The propellers are showing on the left part of the sky, ruining the shot. And this is surprising. It is the only time this happened in many tries. When shooting JPEG files, it is always important to set up carefully the white balance before shooting, as this file don't respond very well to white balance adjustments in post-production. The next day there was a huge amount of haze, the mountain was barely visible to the naked eye, so I decided to go for a stress test of the raw files of the Mini 2. I had to add extreme amounts of contrast in every possible way to get some sort of detail in the mountain, the clouds and the sky. The result is not bad considering the terrible light conditions. Of course there is noise and color banding, but the raw files still manage to maintain some information, considering the post-processing torture. I decided to compare the raw versus JPEG files in a scene with moving elements. Since I don't have ND filters, I decided to shoot after sunset, so that I could use a slow shutter speed, in this case 1/4 of a second. It is not the ideal speed, as I'm taking one shot every 5 seconds with raw files, and the correct speed would be 2.5 seconds. But with a drone we cannot go for such a low speed, and we have to compromise. I like the result. The file handled very well the transition from natural light to artificial. The image is stable, and I could stabilize it even more if needed. The amount of motion blur is not ideal, and the movement of the cars is not perfectly smooth, but this can only be achieved with a camera on a tripod. With JPEG files I could use a frequency of a shot every 3 seconds, so the movement of the cars is a bit slower and smoother. The transaction of colors is really good. The JPEG files of the Mini 2 are a big surprise. Excellent stuff. The Mini 2 and the Mavic Mini don't have an intelligent hyperlapse mode, so we need to find a way to get some slow and consistent movement while taking photos in timed shots. I find that with a bit of practice it is possible to advance at a slow, constant speed in cinematic mode by pushing the right stick by only a small amount. At first I tried with raw files and therefore one shot every 5 seconds, advancing as low as possible. The minimum speed is 0.1 meter per second, but the resulting hyperlapses add a lot of sideways drifting. Also, with such a long frequency of shots would be too short. So we can rule out raw files. We are much better off using JPEG and choosing a frequency of shot every 2 or 3 seconds. Another benefit is that at one shot every 2 seconds, the shooting process will only take 10 minutes. Then I tried with JPEG file at 2 shots per second, using a relatively higher speed. I was aiming at a speed of 0.6 meter per second. The idea being that the momentum of the aircraft moving forward at higher speed would reduce or prevent the sideways movement. And indeed, the result was much more stable this time. Also, I must admit that the colors with these JPEG files are really nice. Let's try this time a move sideways. This time I push the right stick slightly to the right, trying to maintain the speed at around 0.6 meter per second. I like the result, the movement is quite smooth, apart from a big wobble towards the middle of the clip, but that is entirely my fault. I accidentally pushed the left stick sideways, something to be absolutely avoided, as the camera pans very quickly to the side. Finally I decided to go for the full Monty, trying to combine a forward move with a sideways one. I will try to achieve it by pushing the right stick in a diagonal position between the forward and the right one, basically at 1:30 o'clock. This move is a bit harder to control, but the result is quite stable and I'm sure it will improve with a bit of practice. In the middle of the clip I decided to add another movement by raising steadily the altitude. In my opinion it worked very well, but I suggest keeping the change in elevation around the lowest speed, 0.1 meter per second. Once again, I must say that the colors obtained with the JPEG file of the Mini 2 are really pleasant. With a bit of imagination and creativity, it is possible to obtain several kinds of hyperlapses with these drones. I expected it would be very boring to keep manually the same direction and speed, but in reality, at one photo every 2 seconds, it takes only 10 minutes, and it is actually good fun. If you're interested in drone, photography and videography, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Bye for now.